room. It's very cozy. It's nice to actually be able to see you all. The garden is so beautiful, but with those lights, I can't actually properly see anyone who's more than, 10, 15 feet away. So it's actually nice to be able to look to the back and be able to see everybody's faces. So, welcome. So many questions. I have a 5-year-old child I am responsible for. And I feel torn because I am worried about my 50-year-old aunt who is not mentally healthy, and my grandmother who is 70 years old and lives far away from me. How do I decide who to take care of? And how can I even do it? And this has been asked by Kushali Thakkar on Instagram. So a 5-year-old child, a 50-year-old aunt, and a 70-year-old grandmother. The responsibility and the stress around taking care of loved ones and balancing that, whether it's just balancing your children and your parents, which is a situation that many, many, many people find themselves in, whether it's your children, your parents, and your in-laws, which, especially those in extended families, as you see in India, find themselves in. This is kind of part of the package deal of life. In this case, it's children, an aunt and a grandmother, but exactly what role they are, exactly what their relation is, isn't nearly that important, because a lot of people are closer to an aunt than to a mother, closer to a grandmother than to a mother. So you've got 3 different people dependent on you. And then, of course, you've got your own life and your own responsibilities. And you've got that aspect of your dharma that is more than just your relational dharma. We all have relational dharma. Children to our parents, parents to our children, sisters and brothers to our siblings. But we also all have dharma that's more than just relational. And so you find yourself kind of juggling it all, and unfortunately there isn't a specific equation. It's not like you can say, well, 5x plus 3y equals z. And then you just stick, X in for the child and Y in is the grandmother, and then Z is going to tell you how many hours a week you can spend with each of them. There's no equation like that. There is no right way of answering this question other than just anchoring in with yourself. Maybe what we can do is we can actually have someone outside bringing people in. Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, it'll just be more systematic. Perfect. Thanks. So, there isn't an equation. You've got to tap into yourself. Obviously the best place to start is, who needs you the most? in my opinion, the 5-year-old. The 50-year-old aunt who's not mentally sound may be in need of some help, but presumably she's managed to get to 50 without Kushali's help. Presumably she's lived most of her life without Kushali being the one to take care of her. So it doesn't mean don't help, but it means when you're thinking about who needs you, because as caregivers, there's a whole drama of the caregiver. And it's a beautiful role to play. It's a very, very beautiful aspect of our Dharma. But it's important not to get lost in the identity of it. And a lot of us do. We get lost in this kind of sense of, I am the one who takes care. I am the caregiver. And without me, nothing can be done. And that's a drama. And so 5-year-old, dependent on you. 50-year-old, help her where you can, but understand that she's gotten this far on her own resources, and encourage her to continue to use her own resources. However she's gotten this far, encourage her to keep using them, because one of the things about people who are mentally unsound is, in many cases, if you reach out to take care of them, they're going to let you. And then what began as a very part-time job could very easily become a full-time job. And then all of the resources that they were used to using to take care of themselves, no longer available to them, because now you're the caretaker. So I'd be careful about that. If somebody has gotten to an age of 30, 40, 50, able to take care of themselves, एक काम करिएगा भैया, इसका थोड़ा सा कम करिएगा, बहुत डिस्टर्बेंस होता है, जो आते हैं इनको आके बस यहीं बैठने दीजिएगा, ठीक है? As people come in, it'll just be a lot easier. Krishna Priya, maybe you can just sort of help as people come in. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, just move up. It'll be great. It'll just be so much easier. Perfect. It's enough. It's enough. It's enough. It's enough. We're good. We're good. We're good. If we get a whole other crowd, it's different, but we're good. We're good. Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's perfect. It's all perfect. We're good. Thank you. Just trying to keep as little constant disturbance of people who are here as possible. Rohan, as people come in, just put them down gently, quietly. Okay? Thanks, love. So, be really careful about taking over the responsibility of somebody else's life who to date has actually been able to take care of themselves. Even if in your mind you would do it better, be really careful about that, because that could become your full-time job for the rest of your life. As far as the 70-year-old grandmother, well, it depends. Because in a lot of cultures, a lot of places, 70 is young. I've got a lot of friends who are in their 70s who really don't need anybody to take care of them, and who are, 70 is the new 40, the new 50, whatever it is. They're doing great. They don't need somebody to take care of them. So you also don't want to create a situation where someone who's strong and healthy gets in their mind, oh my God, now I'm old. In India, this happens a lot. For me, coming from the West, it was really a big culture shock, because I'd see people who were 60, 65, in what looked to me like essentially fine health, say things to Pujya Swamiji like, okay, now I'm done, just, take me up. Tell God, just like, I'm done. ready to go. And I'm thinking, you're so young. Or you'll hear people say things like, oh, I've got to take care of my mother or my father. How old are they? Mom is 62. Because now they are old, to the extent that someone feels young and vibrant, even if you in your 20s or 30s feel like, oh my God, 70 is so old, they must be, they must need help going to the bathroom. Most people at that age actually still feel really young and vibrant. So I would say to you, the 5-year-old most definitely needs your help the most. 5-year-old is not going to make it on his own. 5-year-old needs you physically, emotionally, needs you to teach him, guide him, show him. That which you give to the 5-year-old not only is going to keep him safe and healthy as a young child, but is actually the building blocks for his entire life. Next on my list would be grandmother. Is there someone nearer to her who's also able to help out? Because she said she lives far away. Well, do you have any other relatives nearby? Can someone else do the occasional popping in on grandma to see how she is? Can you get grandma on FaceTime? WhatsApp video, right? I mean, even people who did not grow up on technology are not hopeless and lost. Lots and lots of people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s are able to figure out this technology thing to connect with their kids and their grandkids. So, Koshali, don't take all of this on your shoulders. Take care of your child. He's your responsibility. Check in periodically, once a week, once every couple weeks, with the aunt, with your grandmother. They'll let you know if they need something. But also make sure that in the family you're not the only one. Do you have cousins, siblings? Are there other nieces and nephews who can also come in and help out? Because 50 is really young. 70 is still really young. And if you get into a full-time job of caregiving, by the time your 5-year-old is a teenager, you're going to have 2 additional full-time jobs. Make sure to also look in and say, what is your dharma? And maybe it's caregiving. There really are people, and it's a beautiful, beautiful offering of life, who really feel that their dharma is to care for others. Whether it's in a professional setting, whether they actually go into it as a career, or whether they are just always the one in the family, in the community, who's cooking soup for the neighbor who's sick, who's picking up the kids from school so the mom can work, who's just that role. And if that is your dharma, beautiful, embrace it. But if it's not, if you feel like there might actually be something different that you're called toward, give yourself some time and space for that, because the 5-year-old, I imagine, takes up a lot of your time and energy. I can't imagine you've got a lot of time and energy left over after that. So So use it to really figure out what is your Dharma and to fulfill that to the very best of your ability, aside from your Dharma as a mother, aside from your Dharma as a niece and a granddaughter. What else? Great. Other questions? We don't have our stand-up mics, but the room is relatively quiet, and I think we should be able to hear everyone. Yeah, any questions? All right, then I'll just take another that's come from our internet audience. How can I forget my past? And similarly, how can I forget those people who betrayed me at the worst? And this is asked by Shreya. So the goal isn't to forget our past. The goal is to make peace with it. When we speak about forgive and forget, on a personal level, I prefer just forgive and move forward. And the reason is that a lot of times the memory serves a purpose for us. It teaches us a lesson. It reminds us maybe of what not to do. Ways that we've been hurt might be really good to remember, not, oh my God, that awful person who hurt me. There's no need to hold on to the pain, the anger. But it might be really good to remember, oh yeah, I was convinced to give all my money to this person I thought was my friend who convinced me that they had a sure thing in the stock market and ended up losing all my money. I was convinced because of the way this friend made me believe him or believe her. That would be a good thing to remember, so that in the future, if someone you know says, hey, guess what? I've got an inside secret. Promise. Invest now. You'll see the magic. You might think 10 times before you got tempted. You might remember that those were the exact words that the person used before. You might remember to ask to see a little bit more evidence, a little bit more information, to find out a little bit more, rather than turn over your life savings yet again. So it's important to remember. I also think it's important to remember because, on the one hand, we're spirit, we're soul, we're divinity, we're love, we're truth, we're consciousness. Aham Brahmasmi, we are one with the Supreme Reality, inseparable. And on the other hand, we have this human story, this particular incarnation, this particular journey. And you think all of your past actions and past lives and all of the karmic fruit that they've borne, all of the constellations of the stars and the planets, the magnetic pull between the planets and the earth at the exact moment that you were born. All of this has come together to give you exactly the life that you're living, to have you born into exactly that family, to have exactly those experiences, to have those challenges. And I'm just not sure that ultimately the idea is to have them and then forget them. I think there is something that is important and precious about not just the eternal nature of soul, but also of kind of the continuity of this human experience. To be able to look back and to see how you've grown, how you've learned. To be able to look back and to say, wow, God, I've been through a lot. Because there are moments. There are moments where we feel down, feel frustrated. We have so many different emotions that seem to arise out of kind of no reason whatsoever of the present moment. And to be able to look back and to say, well, God, here's all the pieces that have led up to this present moment. Is there anyone somewhere in this building blocks that might explain why present moment is triggering me? Or why present moment seems to be so much more difficult for me than for others? I'm a big proponent of insight and introspection and contemplation, not ad nauseum. Not to the point where it becomes rumination. You're literally just chewing the same thing over and over again. It's actually what the original definition of rumination meant. Is it's how, can't remember if it's cows or horses, but it's either cows or horses, and it's one of them chew and they chew and they chew and they chew and they just keep chewing and they chew and they chew and they chew. And the word rumination actually originally meant that act of essentially chewing that which has already been chewed, re-chewing that which has already been chewed. And now, of course, we use it to mean those endless thoughts in the mind. So I don't mean insight or introspection to the point where it becomes rumination and you're stuck in it. But to the point where it gives you a bit of understanding. Be curious. You've got decades spent in this particular body, this karmic journey, this jivatma, this subtle body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, the pranic body. These things travel. They travel with the soul from body to body. What's different about your mind, your intellect? It's interesting. It's unique to you. So again, you don't want to get caught up in it, because ultimately the spiritual goal is realize you're not the body, you're soul. But we also have these stories. So I would say, Shreya, don't try to forget your past. First of all, you won't be able to anyway. And the harder you try to forget it, the more you remember it. It's the nature of the mind. The more I decide I am not going to think about this thing, the more I think about it. Right? It's that age-old, okay, close your eyes, meditate, just don't think about elephants. What do you think about? Elephants? Nature of the mind. And this is why negative affirmations don't actually work. So when you say, for example, let's say you want to quit smoking, and you give yourself an affirmation that says, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a smoker. What word is filling your mind? Smoker, 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 smoker. And this is why when you do affirmations negatively, it doesn't work. I'm not angry at my mother, I'm not angry at my mother, I'm not angry at my mother. Who's in your mind? Constantly. Mother and anger. Doesn't work. Whatever you fill the mind with, that's what the mind is filled with. And it's why when they give affirmations, people who do it in a way where it actually works, if you're taking the smoking example, you would say, I make healthy choices, for example. I make healthy choices. Situation with the mother. I live in love and compassion. Those are the affirmations that are actually going to enable you to move through what you're working with. So don't try to forget the past, because if you do that, all you're going to fill your mind with is the past. I don't remember when you stole my money. I don't remember when you stole my money. I don't remember when you stole my money. Obviously you remember. It's all you remember now. Instead, work on making peace with it. I forgive you for stealing my money. Forgive. And then move forward. I am someone who embraces each new day. I move into each moment with trust, openness, and compassion. These are the sorts of things that you can say to yourself that will enable you to not forget, but become free of it. These are the sorts of things that will help your mind no longer be filled with the anger about the past. But learn your lessons. Learn the lessons. People have betrayed you, okay. Well, one lesson there is, guess what? People betray you. It's part of the path. Disappoint you. It's part of the package deal of having an open heart. But the alternative is living in jail, suffocating yourself, closing yourself off completely. So we continue to open our hearts, we continue to trust, knowing that, I could get hurt, I could get betrayed, I could get disappointed, but it's worth it. Because the only other alternative is to live in jail. And that's not worth it. So Shreya, keep your heart open. Open it again. You've been betrayed. Welcome to the human package. Welcome to the human journey. Welcome to being a person with an open heart and trusting being. Now allow yourself to let that go so that you can open your heart again. Other questions? Yes.
How to restore connection with your family?
He's got a mic for you, actually.
Sorry.
Okay.
So how to restore connection with your family when it seems that it's been lost in space, and when you feel that you cannot be yourself, but, your family, relatives, and whenever you try to be, there is loads of drama, misunderstanding, and there's just no point.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations for the intention. It's really beautiful and really important to try to establish that connection with your family. Far too many people are too ready to just say, you know what, forget it. Forget it. They don't understand me. I don't understand them. I am estranged. You hear this more and more these days. I'm estranged from my mother, estranged from my father, estranged from this one. And I know every once in a while, that is the only way to take care of your own physical and or mental, emotional, spiritual health. But I think that it's actually necessary a lot less frequently than it happens. I think that we are losing our ability to have what in Hindi we call San Shakti, which is that power of forbearance, the power of acceptance, of taking things. Tolerance isn't a great word. I prefer acceptance to tolerance, but you could also put tolerance in here. That we're losing that ability. And I think it's a critical ability. I think the idea that we can just cut people out of our lives, whether they're relations by blood, relations by marriage, whoever they are, that we can just kind of keep cutting them out whenever we want because we're not enjoying the relationship. I don't think it's a very healthy way to go. And again, sometimes, you have no choice. You really have to cut them out. They're literally toxic to you. But congratulations for having that drive to reconnect. You're right. It's very hard. Being misunderstood by your family is super common. There's kind of an agreed upon truism in the spiritual community, which is no matter how enlightened you may think you are, go back and spend a few days with your family. It's kind of a litmus test. You think you're there? Go back to your parents' house for 2 weeks and then come back and let us know how it is. And that doesn't mean that you're not beautifully spiritually evolving. You are. It just means you're not done yet. And it's a lot easier to feel like we are there and done when we're not in our parents' house. And one of the reasons for that is this misunderstanding. And is because, as you say, they relate to you as someone you are not. You've changed, you've grown. Maybe they never understood you. Maybe they understood you when you were very young. And they have just missed the last decade or 2 or 3. Whatever way it is, what I've learned in my life is you don't need people to understand you in order to be able to love them. And if you hold that as a criterion, you're going to be disappointed. Because people's ability to understand you is a quality of their own willingness to break through all of the laws, all of the patterns, all of the agenda, all of the values, all of the priorities that they've set for themselves. It requires them to break free from the need to believe that all of their decisions were right. Because maybe they've made decisions that are different than the decisions you're making. And if they allow themselves to understand the rightness of your decision, well, that may make them have to question their own decisions. And that's not something everyone's prepared to do. Question their values, question their priorities, question their beliefs, question their decisions. That's asking a lot of people. And not everyone's prepared to do that. A lot of people aren't. And so what I would offer you is the possibility of loving someone who doesn't understand you. And realizing that that's okay. That you don't actually need them to understand you in order for you to love them. You can love them in their fallibility in the same way that they love you in your fallibility. Because you're not perfect. Even if they understood you, you're still not perfect. But they're going to be able to love you anyway, in whatever they understand of you. Can you love them in their inability to understand you, or their unwillingness to attempt to understand you? I remember when I first decided, or rather, the decision happened to me. It wasn't like a big conscious intellectual thing, but when I knew that I was meant to live here in India. And when I first started trying to talk to my parents about it, I spoke the absolute truth. I was always someone who was deeply committed to truth. And I spoke the absolute truth. It was, for me, all about God. And oh my God, here was the experience that I was having in India. And here was what I knew my life was about. And it was soul, and it was spirit, and it was this mother goddess river, and it was my guru, this embodiment of the divine on earth. And it was all of those things. And every time I opened my mouth about that, my parents got this really scared look on their face. And I could tell they were using that voice that you use if somebody in front of you has like a gun to their head and you're trying to figure out, how close can you get to them to get it out of their hands before they make the mistake of shooting themselves? And you use that kind of sing-songy, yes, I understand everything you're going through voice so that no one reacts badly. And I realized that what I was saying scared them. It scared them for me. They thought I was in danger. They thought something bad had happened to me. That I had been brainwashed, or I had joined a cult, or I had lost my mind, or I had been kidnapped. I mean, when I said God and Ganga and Guru, they heard brainwashed, cult, kidnapping. And I realized that once I knew that that was the extent of their capacity to hear and understand, for me to continue to talk about it like that was not actually the truth. Imagine if my highest truth is the letter A. Okay, let's just sum up my truth as A. But every time I say A, you hear D. You cannot hear A. I speak A, you hear D. And I realized that. However, what I learned was there was an option B. Option B was the poor children and the schools we were building and the medical care programs we were doing and the programs for women. And that was true for me. I had always wanted to serve and to help and to work with children, to work with women. It was true that I was being given this beautiful opportunity to be part of doing that, and that it touched me deeply. It wasn't my highest truth. It wasn't why I was in India. I was working with poor kids in San Jose. I would have done that work wherever I was. I didn't need to come to India to do it. My highest truth was A. It was all about God. But when I spoke B, they could hear B. I said B, they heard B, they understood B. And what I realized as the days went by is that therefore B was the closest truth. Because it was certainly a lot closer to A than D was. And by speaking A and having them hear D, I was knowingly contributing to them misunderstanding. And that I needed to get over myself and this attachment that they were going to get the God thing. Because they weren't. And that's okay. Because they could love me anyway. And support me anyway. And see me anyway. Even if they didn't understand. And that we had this place B that was still true. And it was kind of a common ground. They understood. They knew that I was into working with kids. Working with women. It's what I was doing my PhD in psychology for. So they could wrap their mind around me wanting to build schools, me wanting to do something for the kids and women. It made sense. And you're gonna need to find that B for you. Because your ability to go back into relationship is going to be dependent upon you finding a truth in you, even if it's not the ultimate, fullest, highest, deepest truth, but a truth that they can hear, a truth they are prepared to understand. If you stay attached to them really, really getting it, really, really, really understanding it, you may get lucky, but you're also very likely to be disappointed. And I would really ask yourself, why does it matter so much? They love you is what matters the most. Parts of you they can understand, but parts they can't. And that's okay. They don't need to understand all of you to love you. You'll find people in your life who understand you fully. It's just not necessarily going to be your family. Chances are it won't be your family. It's kind of the package deal of family. Find a common ground. Because that love and that connection is much more important than trying to get them to understand you in a situation that might just push them farther away with fear. Yeah, I know it's not easy. But it's a beautiful and courageous decision you're making. And in the same way, try and understand them. That may be the best way to help them find the courage to try to understand you. Good, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Jai Ma Gange.
Jai Ma Gange.
Drug addiction today is a big problem. And drug penetration is
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the word.
I said drug addiction.
Drug addiction,
is a big problem.
Yes.
And drug penetration is a much, much bigger problem. So how do we as society...
Drug penetration?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
The supply of drugs to the youth across borders, across countries. Okay. So that is a much bigger problem actually. Because of that, the addiction is spreading much faster. So how do we as as responsible citizens, adults, as society members, try to overcome this? Because there are many people, good friends who have got caught in this web of addiction.
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's two aspects here, and I'll take the second one first because it seems like it's more of what's on your mind, and then we'll come to the addiction itself. What we're seeing a lot in America, a lot in other countries, is people getting addicted to drugs that are actually legal, but that are being brought in, and people are in a very methodical, calculated way getting enticed to essentially get addicted to them. We've seen this with particularly the pain-relieving drugs. A youth will injure himself, herself, playing soccer, playing some sport, running, knee injury. And the doctors will prescribe a very heavy-duty and very addictive painkiller. Kid gets addicted to them. Then suddenly it spirals. And it spirals and it spirals and it spirals. And we are seeing more and more and more of this. And of course, not only in kids, but it bothers me a lot more when it happens in kids. It just feels like you take something that's already a crime and then you make it a much more severe crime. And for this, what we need is more lobbying, more laws around what drug manufacturers are able to do, what counts as legal ways. For example, the reason that this happens is because it's not the makers of the drug who are the ones giving it to the kids, it's the doctors who are prescribing it. But they're under all of these inducements from the drug manufacturers. So the drug manufacturers use all of these really insidious techniques to get doctors to prescribe their drugs. That needs to stop. Laws can make it stop. There are ways to lobby lawmakers to get them to really crack down on drug manufacturers. We need to do that. Whatever country you live in. Wherever you live, if that is a major issue, which I think is probably worldwide at this point, laws need to be in place. Sanctions need to be there. Penalties need to be there. Doctors should not be able to be wooed into, lured into, given all kinds of inducements and enticements and rewards for the amount of OxyContin they're, prescribing. It's criminal. So that's that part of it. And of course, as citizens, we need to be aware. As parents, as husbands, as wives, as siblings, we need to be aware. If your child, if your loved one, if you ends up in a doctor's office being prescribed a medicine, Google it. How addictive is it? Are there alternatives? Is your pain that bad? Would Tylenol suffice? To take only what the doctor gives you. We really need to be these days informed. Patients. Active patients. Patients who co-create their own health. Otherwise, with the amount of time that most doctors are able to spend with each patient these days, they become just prescription writers. So you need to be much more actively engaged in your care, in the care of your children, in the care of your loved ones. If you notice someone you know has been prescribed something like that, hey, wait, stop. Isn't there an alternative? If you don't know, ask the pharmacist. Pharmacists are great resources about this. Hey, I noticed the doctor prescribed medicine A. What do you know about this? Is this addictive? Is there a different alternative? Can you call the doctor and get them to approve that instead? As far as drug addiction, so the other topic then, sometimes it comes on just like this. Sometimes everything was fine and great. You had no addictive tendencies. You end up injuring yourself, getting your wisdom teeth pulled out, whatever it may be. You end up, unbeknownst to you, getting prescribed something that makes the pain feel much better, makes those recovery days much better. And suddenly you find that the thought of going through life without that medicine feels unbearable. So sometimes addiction begins like that. But more frequently than not, more frequently than that, people end up getting addicted to alcohol, to drugs, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, because of something in their mind that drives them there. There is a moment in their mind when they decide, this is not what I am meant to feel like. This feeling I'm having, this experience that I am having, is not bearable, manageable, or what I know my life is meant to be. And we find something that makes us feel better. The dilemma, of course, as we know, is the drugs don't work, the alcohol doesn't work, we just end up addicted. But most addictions begin like that. And that's why I always say that addiction is actually it's a spiritual quest that's gone awry. Addicts are not bad people, they're not weak people. They're not people who are somehow substandard and therefore, they're the addicts. They're people who actually had a very spiritual moment, which was this depression, this anxiety, this restlessness, this dissatisfaction is not what life is supposed to feel like. There must be a way out. And that's actually a spiritual calling. Unfortunately, though, instead of turning to meditation, yoga, a spiritual practice, they got lured into drugs or alcohol. But the calling is the same, and the calling is actually correct. That is not what life is supposed to feel like. So it's a spiritual quest. They're looking for the right thing. They're just looking in the wrong place. And so it's really important to have a lot of compassion for people who have become addicted and to recognize the real challenge in overcoming addiction. It can be done. Absolutely. It must be done. It's no way to live. But this idea that a lot of those who are not addicts have, as though somehow addicts should be able to just snap out of it, have some willpower, be strong, don't do that, just stop. It's false. It's very shallow-minded. It doesn't work like that. There's a process. And what you can do if someone you know is addicted, make sure they know that you love them even though they're addicted. And that you are there to help them overcome the addiction. You don't think they're weak. You don't think less of them. You understand how difficult it is. And you want to be there to help them get help. Most addictions need some kind of professional help to overcome them. Most people are not able to kick addictions on their own. If it's mild, if it's just been there for a very little bit of time, okay. But most people, especially the really mind-altering ones, drugs, alcohol, the stuff that actually creates addiction in the brain, they need some assistance, detox programs, ideally inpatient, where there's no access to whatever they're addicted to. And so help that person understand that you are there to support them. They need a community behind them that's going to hold them and keep them safe while they're struggling to let go of it. So be that person. Yeah, great. Thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. And a beautiful day to our family joining from all over the world. And I look so forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. If it's raining, we'll be back in here. If it's not raining, we'll be outside in our garden. And so much love to you all.